I think that they, after World War II, I think is really when the U.S. kind of became or started to become an empire. I mean, you have the creation of the CIA. Then you have the CIA going and doing all these covert operations along with all the other stuff they're doing, like taking over TV stations. I've talked about this, declassified information, when I did a show on the CIA a couple of weeks ago. Brainwashing people, creating assassins, doing all these things. But at the same time, they're going over and implementing, like, the Shah of Iran and Iran, who supposedly was terrible to the people over there and tortured and killed, I don't know how many people. So, and they install the leaders that they want, and that's how they control those countries. So it seemed like what they did from the beginning, after World War II. But when you look at, I always mention the reserve currency and the oil and all of that, but that wasn't a factor until the 70s. So before that, they were still installing leaders in the Middle East and doing all the shit they were doing. So what the fuck were they doing before that? And that's a question that I obviously have, is when you look at it from the side of, okay, not to say this is okay, but you could see their motivation. Of course, they lie about it because they're a bunch of fucking liars. But you see their motivation being more, the OPEC and the US dollar and the economy. And then you look at between the beginning, after World War II, all the way until the 70s, when they took got off the gold standard. And what were they doing there? So it's not just about, I think, the what would you call it? Not just about the petrodollar and the oil and the economy. It's more than that. Where they wanted to become a superpower, I think. I think you have, after World War II is when they really did. Before that, supposedly, they were not a superpower before World War II. And after that, especially with all the gold they got from all the countries in Europe, they, I guess, and I don't know at what point, like, today we're a superpower. I mean, at what point you officially become a superpower, but sometime around there. And I honestly never really thought of this, but the truth is that they did essentially do a lot of this stuff prior to them needing to do it for the oil or the reserve currency. So, like in Iran, I think that was in the 50s when they installed the Shah of Iran. So why were they involved in Iran back then? Well, was it because of I believe Israel was, because it was established after World War II, was there at that time. And did it have anything to do with that? Was it we're going to take over all these countries? And maybe it was about the oil anyway, because you still have that as well. So maybe it was always about the oil, but either way, because they seem to ignore the countries that didn't have oil or didn't have any natural resources. Because why would you want them anyway? And what would be the point? So I guess it was probably more about the countries with the oil and going in there and essentially, whether doing it via the military and making up some reason, or doing it through the CIA and conducting everything that way, which I think is what they pretty much did. And that's where the people in the Middle East obviously started to, especially Iran, started to resent the United States, because they had interfered with their being the Middle East business. They had interfered with their country. They had interfered with who runs the country. And so they wanted, what it seems like to me, and again, this is all my opinion, and I'm not a historian either, but what it seems like to me is that they wanted control over these countries, especially the ones with the oil. They didn't want to be a country like you just had World War II. They're not going to go in and just start taking over countries. That's not the quote unquote American way. And, so most of the stuff is kept secret. They have the CIA, they have CIA operatives, they have CIA operatives within other countries that are working for them, giving them information. So they're able to go in and essentially install these leaders and have influence in these countries, and essentially running it by proxy. I mean, if they have a leader that they've installed, they wanted to control these leaders. So it was like they put puppets in there. So how is that not, that seems like what I would call an empire, and that was initially. And then you have after the Vietnam War, and you have that where they went in, and I don't know that they would have had anything to do with Vietnam after the war. I don't think they had anything to do with Korea after the war, which basically he didn't really do anything. North and South Korea remained, and that was kind of it. That was a civil war between North and South Korea that they shouldn't have got involved in. But their whole thing back then was, and this is how they used it, whether they were using it to control countries or not, was we need to increase democracy. We need to make the world safe for democracy. And they couldn't have believed this shit. I don't know, unless they were that stupid. But I know that their theory was that once one country goes, that more and more countries are going to go, and there's going to be all these communist countries. And it sounds like a ridiculous idea that because there's a few communist countries that it's going to spread and communism is going to spread across the world, because it never did. Now, that was the other thing that they were doing, is interfering in that way. And you had the Cold War, and anything that had to do with a communist country, like the Korean War and the Vietnam War, they got involved in that. Now, why did they really get involved in it? I don't know. I mean, part of it, I think, was money. You had like the Kennedy assassination, and in the movie JFK, and I know, part of it was, most of it's, I think, pretty much true, and it's based on those books. But where you have these companies like Bell Helicopter and all of these weapons manufacturing companies almost going out of business, and then Vietnam starting, and then them becoming billionaire companies. So you had that part of it. So the war is a business thing. And I mean, how much of it was that? Did they really want to, in those two situations, keep the world safe for democracy? Is that, did they ever? Or was it, what can we get out of this? Can we now have another regime that we basically control? That I mean, this is what they're saying. They're saying we, not me saying we. So you had that, I think, going on. And then after the U.S. got off the gold standard, then it was the deal with Saudi Arabia and all of the OPEC countries, which I'm not sure of all of them. I guess Iraq is an OPEC country, and I think Jordan is as well. I should get a list of the OPEC countries. But then it was, okay, we're going to go in and meaning we, this is them talking, and make sure that we keep our interest intact no matter what. And that's what they did. And they attacked countries that they needed to. They installed dictators in countries that they, look at Egypt, and they were friends with Mubarak. And then they had whatever covert operations that they did, especially recently. I remember hearing a story, and I mean, this was in print, obviously. It was in a major newspaper, where they kidnapped some guy and sent him to Guantanamo or something. Just, went into another country, just grabbed them and, brought them over there, which is kind of crazy. Where they had a CIA type operation in the middle of the night, where it was kind of like in the show Homeland. It reminded me of a couple scenes from there where they just went in and did that. So are they an empire in the sense of what an empire was years ago? Well, no, they're not like the Roman Empire or even what the Nazis were trying to do. But they control as much as they possibly can, and they do it in a secretive way. So what they're doing now, I mean, and what they've just done over the past few years is throw all these people, get all these people out of power.